Okay, well, welcome to this little podcast, and it's called Optimal Content Delivery Strategies for Concurrent, Remote, and In-Class Students, version 2.0. This is my second one I've done after thinking about things a little more and trying some things out with real students. So my name's Sean Heffernan, and my website's call me Dr. H at school. I teach right now. I teach middle and high school in the Pioneer Valley. And yeah, my website's there, kidsengineer.com. So picture me with Hugman. That was a Lego project done by Nathan Sawaya. If you want more info on that, you can go to his website. And they put these all over the place, hugging different things. So it's kind of cool. Yeah, so let's talk about this. And the title's kind of a mouthful, but what we're talking about is how do you deliver your content to when you have students in front of you, live students or in-class students, and you have some students working remotely. All right, so this could apply in different cases, and we'll get into that next. So a little context, the Massachusetts Department of Education asked districts for plans for 3 different scenarios: remote, all students at home; hybrid, half the class alternates, so half are in class, come in on one day and half are at home; and all in-class model with all the students in school. However, for both hybrid and in-class, the state required districts allow parents a remote option. So even in the in-class model, some students could be at home. We're seeing about maybe 25%. I think that's common around here, choosing to keep their students at home if it's hybrid or in class. And a lot of schools are starting with the remote model and then going to hybrid. Okay, there are a few starting with hybrid or in class, but more districts are either going remote for quite a while or just starting a few weeks remote and then going to hybrid. All right, at least in our area. So there's a lot of terminology and definitions to get through, or at least some, so we're talking about the same thing. So in terms of distance learning approaches, you can have synchronous, so all the students and you are meeting at the same time, usually in a Google Meet or something like Zoom, all right? And then you can have asynchronous distance learning where the students access the material on their own schedule. And that has 2 different kind of flavors: scheduled, so all the students are working on the same thing within a certain period of time, typically a week. And that allows student interaction because they are accessing the material at the same time. You can get a lot more asynchronous student interaction through discussion boards or commenting on each other's work, things like that. And then asynchronous can be unscheduled too, so would be self-paced type of courses. However, the disadvantage of that is it's hard to get the interaction between students because they're accessing the material. It could be totally different times. All right. So as far as I know, most districts are going for a lot of synchronous time this year. In the spring, at least we did a lot of asynchronous, which can work, but it's really a lot of preparation to really do it well. And then it's hard for some students to adjust to. Doesn't really work for everyone. Yep. So, and I mentioned before, most districts starting with a remote, going to hybrid. Many are. So, what do we mean by this concurrent teaching? So, for the synchronous meetings only, right? What we're talking about with concurrent teaching is some students are in class and some are remote. Okay. So, this could occur in the remote case. So, for example, right now we have special populations, we call them. They're coming in to school even though we're in remote mode. And that could be they could be students on IEPs that need extra support. It could be kids that don't have good internet access. So for whatever reason, you may have some kids in your school in front of you, even though it's remote mode. And then hybrid, typically you have an in-class cohort and then a remote cohort, right, at home, but even when you're teaching your in-class cohort, again, some students may be at home, those parents that chose the remote option for their student. All right, and then although we're not planning on doing this, you could be teaching your in-class cohort and your remote cohort at the same time, but we feel it's better to do one at a time and focus on them. I think our administration is setting it up so all the remote student will be in one cohort, so that'll be nice. We'll have at least one of the two cohorts will be all face-to-face or in class. All right, so yeah. So if you're all in class, you don't have to worry about concurrent teaching. Same if you're all remote, you don't really have to worry about it. So if you have all in class, definitely I would not use Google Meet or Zoom or any sync meetings. The kids are all in front of you. Okay. So some things we'll also think about today is grouping, whole class, one-to-one teaching group. Oh, I have groups twice there, excuse me. Oh no, that's just one of the forms of grouping. So you may have either cohort groups or even groups within those cohorts. All right, so what are we talking about today? What's the best way to deliver your content in this synchronous distance learning with both concurrent and remote, concurrent remote and in-class students? So what are the goals, at least to me? We want to maximize student engagement, especially with, when we were all thrown into distance learning in the spring. All right, we want to make that a really good student experience. And to me, it's important. I didn't think of this initially when I was considering all this, but the students were at home all spring, okay, and they were isolated, quarantined typically, right, with their family. So there's a need, I think, and a desire and for as much face-to-face contact as possible, obviously within social distancing parameters. But that's something to think about as we consider this, how we're delivering concurrently. All right, because you can have more or less face-to-face contact, and we'll get into that in a minute. Of course, we want it to be easy for teachers and students. We want to eliminate audio feedback issues. We'll get into that detail later too, and allow for different grouping options. So our school's starting remote for 2 to 3 weeks with special populations at school. I have some photos of what that could look like later, but a small number of kids will be face-to-face. Then we're going to go to hybrid with 2 cohorts, alternating days with asynchronous Fridays. That may have changed. We'll check the schedule later. I'll show you our schedule. And we're using Google Classroom and Google Meets as our main delivery technology platforms. Classroom allows you to post your content, do grading, etc. And then we use Meets for our synchronous meetings. We have at our school at least a mix of AV methods, wired methods, and Wi-Fi. We use Airtame. I'll go into that later too. All students will have Chromebooks. Teachers have different laptops, could be PC, Mac, and even if some iPads. I know I present with my iPad sometimes. All right, so got to thinking about this. It seemed to me there was 2 different ways to think about this concurrent delivery. And one I call as if all remote. So you can see there in the picture, F stands for face-to-face, R for remote. So we can treat as if all remote, we basically treat all the students the same as if they were somewhere else, even if they're sitting in front of us, okay? And then there's as if all in class. You can see there the line separates your face-to-face or in-class students and your remote students. However, you're treating everyone as if they were sitting in front of you. The remote students are just kind of think of it as being a little farther away, and you're bringing them into your in-class model using technology. So it's really 2 different ways of thinking about it, and I think it's important to have that clear in your mind as we go forward with this presentation. All right, let's talk about these two models. So as if all remote, I think it can make sense if all the majority of kids are remote, okay? All the students are in the Google Meet. Um, I will say that when I had a few students in front of me with our special population, that did work too with the other model. So we're marrying our AV. You don't have to marry your AV because each student's in the Google Meet. Okay, even the ones that are in class, you could do it, but you don't have to. You can also have a second Chrome tab open to slides or other shared documents. Okay, so all students can have that. And the teacher or students can present their screen as desired, okay? Or you can just have the talking head. To reduce or avoid audio feedback, the in-class students can use headphones, but I would actually recommend, again, we're trying to get the maximum face-to-face feeling, right? You can use teacher sound with external speakers and the rest no sound. And have all speakers muted, all but the speaker muted, and make sure to put the teacher microphone behind the speakers. We'll talk more about audio issues later. You can use the doc cam as needed, presented to everybody. All right, so that's one model. Again, it's as if everyone is remote, okay? So even the students in front of you are hooked into your Google Meet. All right. So pros, it's easy. Everyone's the same, okay? And it's familiar from the spring, right? Cons, audio issues. You can have more audio issues with the setup. I'll go over later how to avoid those. And I think the disadvantage of this is, if everyone's remote, if everyone's sitting in front of you with headphones, for me, I would think, I might as well be home. I'm not getting that face-to-face teacher contact, right? Necessarily. Everyone's tethered to their devices, all right? And the grouping can be challenging, especially with Google Meets now. It doesn't have a good breakout room type of technology. So the other one is as if all in class, okay? Makes sense if the majority of kids are in class, all right? However, as I noted before, I did find this actually worked pretty well, even with a couple in-class students. And the majority remote, it actually did work. So only the remote kids and the teachers are in the Google Meet in this model. The kids in front of you are not in the Google Meet, all right? And we are using our AV projection method for our in-class students, right? So instead of being in the Google Meet, they're watching your slides right on the whiteboard or TV or whatever you have. And again, just like the all remote model, you could have a Chrome tab open to slides or other shared documents. So even your in-class students, even though they're not in a Google Meet, they could be in a shared Google Doc or be looking at your slides on their laptop if they choose to. But again, it's in front of them too on the projection device. Teachers or students can still present their screen using Google Meet present option. The teacher can switch to remote student if they're talking and presenting. So in-class students can see them. I'll show a picture later, and you can have them on the board too when you're not presenting. And if your sound's on, you can kind of hear if your remote students want to say something or looking for help. This does have the advantage of minimizing audio feedback issues. Again, our teacher sound, external speakers are connected to our teacher device, but the speaker's muted, and again, our microphone is behind our speakers. And just like before, we can use our doc cam as needed. It's presented to the remote students and projected to in-class students. Pros and cons of this, maximizes our face-to-face time. All right, it gives a tech break to our in-class students. It's more like your regular face-to-face school. It does eliminate a lot of audio feedback issues, and you can do your grouping with social distancing in class, so it's fairly easy. Remote students you have to think about grouping them. They could be their own group. All right. It's not as familiar to teachers and students. And I think the biggest thing to struggle with here potentially is if your in-class students want to speak, they would either have to go up to the teacher laptop or, without audio, some fancy microphone setup. It could be tricky. All right. So so for a whole class discussion, you may want to use the other model, the as if all remote, so everyone's in the Google Meet. If it's more you presenting with the questions and comments, that can work. They may be able to hear the in-class students, the remote students, if they talk up, or the teacher could repeat the question, for example. So yeah, all in class, don't use Google Meet. I think I mentioned that before, right? There's no need for it, and we want to maximize our face-to-face time. For self-paced or hands-on activities, you can check in with the remote students by having them present. I do a lot of programming courses, so I'm planning on doing this. So once I do my initial mini lesson or check-in, my plan is to go through remote students and have them, I can look at their screen one at a time, all right? And whole class discussion, I forgot to change the slide, but that you should probably use Google Meet for, right? Even if there's face-to-face students. So let's talk about audio for a minute and some considerations. A couple things we noticed on our staff when we were meeting before school with all Google Meets and our different, sometimes we were together. So we noticed there was a lot of echo sometimes. Teachers calling it reverb. So how does that occur? Well, multiple devices with sound on at the same time, they could have slightly different delays, so you can get this kind of echoey, disorienting, echoey kind of feeling. How do you get around that? Well, if you have an as if all in class model, remember, then students in front of you are not in Google Meet, so that issue can't come up. You can also have everyone listen to the external teacher speakers with their devices sound off, so that eliminates this echo. Headphones could also be used, but my feeling on those is it reduces that face-to-face feel of classes. And then feedback. So feedback is when the speaker sound from, right, whoever's speaking gets fed back into the speaker's microphone. And there's a slight delay, so it provides, there's a continuous loop of that sound being amplified every time, and you get this kind of squealing sound eventually as it's amplified. So again, you can use this as if all in class model, so that should eliminate your feedback, right? There's only one speaker going, and right? So as long as that's placed well, you won't have that issue. So looking at this picture, if I have my teacher, you can see I put K for speaker is in front of the teacher's laptop. Let's say the teacher has a laptop in front of them with their microphone, right? So the speaker is in front of the laptop. So that way it won't feed back as much into the microphone. You can also reduce the volume or sensitivity if you do get feedback. S is for the students sitting in front of the teacher. In terms of AV setup, so at least at our school, we have different projection methods going. We're gradually converting to Wi-Fi projection with a technology called Airtame, which I really like, which I have in my room. So I connect via Wi-Fi to the projector, which is great. I can just be anywhere, okay? And another thing I like about it is students can show their work on teacher, but it's directed by the teacher, all right? So I like that too. Some of our teachers have laptops, but no Airtame yet, so they could wire into their projector, okay? So it makes them a little less mobile, but they can still move around with their cord. And some teachers have don't have a way, like the laptop might not have the right adapter to go to their projector, but they might still have desktop PCs, so they can use the PC essentially as their projection device. So connect to the projector or TV through a wired connection, and then they could log in to the meeting on their mobile device and present with that device. All right, to me that gets a little complicated, so but that can work too. We can again use external sound. So here's some photos of this concurrent teaching in action. So you can see in this class I have a few students in front of me, and if you look on the whiteboard, you can see the Google Meet up there going, and I have this remote students all in one picture there. A little hard to see, but my laptop is up in front of the class there, front of the whiteboard. And that allows me to see the students, the remote students on my laptop, and also the in-class students at the same time. Okay. If I want to just kind of make sure when I'm presenting, I can just glance back at the whiteboard. I'll show you in a minute too how to tell from Chrome as well. So here's the view from my teacher chair. Again, I can see my remote students in front of them, and as you can see, I'm monitoring their chat too. All right, and also I can see my in-class students easily. If you look at the picture of my laptop here, you see the little blue box. It shows what Chrome tab I'm projecting. Okay, so I am actually presenting my slides on that tab. I have those slides open, okay? And that's what the remote students are seeing. So check that little blue kind of TV-like icon. Will tell you which tab you're presenting to students. It can get a little confusing. I know I usually have many tabs open, so you do have to kind of check. Students will tell you too. They typically say, "Oh, your screen's frozen." So, but what they mean is you're not projecting what you think you were projecting. All right, so I really liked this. The other day we actually did a hands-on activity, and I could see what the students were doing. You can see in one of the little pictures the students testing this aluminum foil boat. Okay, so I can kind of monitor what they're doing, and yeah, check the in-class students as well. Also, when your remote students chime in, right, the in-class students can hear what they're saying. All right, so actually that worked quite well. I was pretty excited to be doing a hands-on activity both remotely and in class at the same time. It's pretty fun. All right, so we didn't get into, let's get into a little bit here on pedagogy. How do you, structure this? When we go hybrid, this is our schedule for our school, just a sample week here. We have a cohort A, cohort B, all right? And cohort A is going to come in this week on a Monday, right? It happens to be day 4. When you're teaching cohort A, you can see we have double blocks, so A3, A4 means double block. My cohort B is at home, working remotely. Now, what we're planning on doing for those students is having them do asynchronous work. All right. I think can get hairy if you're trying to teach both at the same time. So our model is going to be to kind of focus on the your in-class cohort, all right, and give your other cohort that's not in front of you other work to do. Well, how could that work? So you could use a flipped classroom model. So what that means is instead of kind of giving, traditionally, right, you have a lecture on one day and homework, right? So the flipped classroom reverses that. So the students are getting their content through videos, taped. You could tape your lectures, right? They could watch that at home, and then on the day they're in class, they're working in groups or just working individually and having the teacher monitor and check everyone. So there's, I think, a lot of advantages to that. But you would have to, tape all your lectures, content, etc., for your asynchronous students. So that's kind of one of the disadvantages of that. You could also, have your content delivery via lecture or however you do it on one day, and then they're asynchronous. They work with it more. Okay. Yeah, and there could be other myriad other ways of doing this too. But that's something to think about as you work with getting this, how figure out how you're going to do this. All right, so in general, my recommendations are to use the as if all remote for like whole class discussions, and use all as if all in class as much as possible. All right, because I think that maximizes the face-to-face time feeling that we've been missing. So I hope this was helpful to you as you get into concurrent teaching, and good luck and have fun with it. All right.